violence of this struggle between successor lords is so great and so all-encompassing that the destruction and death have become no more than statistics, vidtape reports, the custom of age dealt out in the coin of the day. It seems that it has ever been thus. Worse, it has begun to seem as if it will ever be thus, and yet matters seem to be moving towards some ineluctable conclusion, and that, for good or evil, it will come, no matter where we run or how far. This is not the work of our age, it is our inheritance, and if we survive it, it may be our patrimony as well. Technology, much like history, tends to be seen erroneously as a series of steps and events from point A to point B. In reality, there are many misstarts, missteps, and catastrophes that happen constantly, which often take us out to point C, D, and yes, even E. Not every technological advancement is a direct line to the next. Two good examples from the 20th century involve audio-video consumer goods. Both Betamax tapes and Laserdiscs were perfectly functional and in multiple ways superior to the technologies that would render them obsolete. Because history doesn't always smile on the best or most capable, those technologies became dead ends. Of course, that doesn't mean they don't have value, as research that went into both Betamax and Laserdiscs did end up advancing the sector as a whole. I bring this up in our Goliath video because it's a good example of how a piece of technology can push a sector forward while still not quite being able to find widespread success. While not rendered as uncommon as those Betamax tapes in your parents' attic, the quad battlemech has struggled to find acceptance in house militaries, the clans, and even BattleTech players out in the real world. When Dr. David Harrison proposed the four-legged battlemech had distinct advantages over bipedal designs, the idea was destined to find resistance. By the time the first quad mech, the Xanthos, was announced in 2564, there were already dozens of bipedal designs in production, most of which would end up being household names like the Warhammer and the Catapult. It was an uphill battle, and Dr. Harrison was forced to fight for every opportunity he could to get the four-legged designs made. As mentioned, the Xanthos was the first of the quads, produced by Hollis Industries. Dr. Harrison argued that a four-legged design would be a much more stable weapons platform and could raise and lower that platform to improve the firing arcs of its shots, and to cover terrain that a bipedal mech could find challenging. Of course, he still had to prove it. Unfortunately, his secretive work and refusal to bring in outside engineers slowed the development of a functional four-legged design. While it worked in theory, a significant amount of work had to go into both the hardware and the Mechwarrior's Neurohelmet software interface to make movement possible and fluid. While the financially disastrous Xanthos ended up being a contributor to the downfall of Hollis after the design was passed over, Dr. Harrison refused to give up. Following some modest success with the Scorpion in 2570, he decided to build an assault mech quad that could dominate the battlefield. By this point, Dr. Harrison was working for Brigadier Corporation, otherwise known as BrigCorp. Already producing the 55-ton Scorpion, the company was seeing promising sales and was willing to take on the challenge of a heavier quad battlemech. At the time, competition was fierce for those SLDF mech contracts, but BrigCorp and Dr. Harrison were confident that their assault mech would stand out from its peers. Adoption by the SLDF would legitimize quad technology and place BrigCorp in a uniquely profitable position of being the only mech manufacturer that produced them. Of course, actually winning that SLDF contract was a key part of the plan. After the usual testing and certification processes, the GOL-1H Goliath was ready to be shown to the public in 2652. The Goliath weighed in at 80 tons and stood quite tall on its four tri-jointed legs. Sure enough, it did prove to be a stable firing weapons platform. Originally constructed from a standard Nenison 40 frame and a Brigadier 1000F fusion engine, the Goliath was able to reach a top speed of 64.8 km per hour, which was respectable for an assault mech in the late Starleague era. 14.5 tons of Star Slab standard armor provided 232 points of protection, which was 3 tons more than the Zeus 6S's 11.5 tons and a half-ton shy of the awesome 8Q's 15 tons. But what does all that armor protect, you might ask? Along with the G. Garrett 600 communication system and Garrett GRND-TRK 15 targeting and tracking system and 17 heat sinks, the Goliath had 21 tons of its total weight left for weaponry. First, Brig Corp decided to give it a powerful Rand PPC-10 particle projection cannon to deal with hardened targets. 2 Holly long-range Missile 10 systems allow for fire support and mid-range combat. Finally, 2 Ramsey machine guns were split between the right and left torsos to provide some up-close conflict resolution. This is a good place to stop and talk about the limitations of the quad design. A standard battlemech has 78 critical locations. Due to the fact that it has 4 legs instead of 2 legs and 2 arms, the quad battlemech has only 66. This is a significant price to pay as it limits engineers from doing too much with technology like endosteel and ferrofibrous armor that take up a lot of internal space. While it's not a fatal flaw, it's the one that we need to be cognizant of as we look at the original Goliath and its later variants. For the era it was created in and the first few succession wars, the Goliath 1H's loadout is fine if a little unimpressive for an 80-ton battlemech. The 10 damage from the PPC is solid out to 18 hexes, and the 20 LRMs per turn out to 21 hexes is decent too. My personal issue is that I'd really like to see a medium laser or 2 in the mix. You could get there if you pulled the machine guns and added 2 medium lasers. The mech would run hot if you fired everything, but as we're going to see, the 1H's stock loadout had an exploitable weakness that those 2 machine guns just couldn't offset. Only a limited number of Goliath 1H's were produced before the collapse of the Star League. This dashed the hopes of Brig Corp, though they were able to find buyers from within the Great Houses, primarily the Free Worlds League and Lyran Commonwealth. Because the mech had so many specialized parts, once the Goliaths that were out there started falling during the First Succession War, they often could not be repaired. When the main production line on Oliver was destroyed in 2837, Korean Enterprises and Defiance Industries took on the challenge of providing those replacement parts to at least keep the existing Goliaths functioning. While Korean did continue to produce Goliaths, it only amounted to a few per year, and that couldn't keep up with the attrition rate impacting existing Goliaths. As the years passed, fewer and fewer Goliaths were seen on the battlefields. There was one battle report that included a Goliath versus Goliath fight in 2950, though it may be the only recorded time the 80-ton brute has slugged it out against another of its kind. One Goliath, piloted by a combined Mechwarrior, clashed against a House Steiner Mechwarrior in his. Apparently, the 2 Goliaths fought for nearly an hour before the wounded combined mech tried to run, and it was eventually cut down. I'm suspicious that the length of this battle may be exaggerated, as it seems unlikely that it would have been even a fraction of that, but the sources are the sources. Having taken the battlefield, the House Steiner forces took possession of the fallen Goliath and quickly stripped it for its rare specialty parts. When a Star League cache of Goliaths was rediscovered during the Third Succession War by the Capellan Confederation, the mechs were put into service with the 5th Capellan Chargers, who conveniently had the old regimental nickname Cochrane's Goliaths. They would be put to the test in 3028 during the first wave of the Fourth Succession War. When House Davion units moved on an old SLDF base, they discovered it was defended by the Capellans. They used their Goliaths, LRMs, and PPCs to good effect at long range, pelting and scattering the attackers, lest they die under the withering defensive fire. Eventually, the Davions were able to work a force of light and fast attackers to close in on the Goliaths. The flaw that we hinted at earlier was the inability of the original Goliath loadout to adequately fire on close targets. With just 2 machine guns on each mech at point-blank range, even a couple of light mechs could work their way through the Goliath's hide. Thankfully, the remaining Goliaths across the Inner Sphere managed to cling on for long enough to get to the 3040s refit with new technology. Going back to the original pluses for the Goliath, a stable assault weapons platform was begging for a new cannon. The Goliath 3M benefited from the upgrade to a Hermes 320XL engine and an additional half-ton of armor, bringing the total to 15. It retains the 17 standard heatsinks, which is a bit of a disappointment, as 10 double heatsinks instead would have opened up a lot of space and weight on the battlemech. The 3M's primary weapon is the Gauss rifle located in the right torso. Unfortunately, it only has 1 ton of ammunition, so it was on the Mechwarrior to choose his or her 8 shots carefully. The traditional 2 LRM-10 racks remain the same, split between the right and left torso, along with the machine gun found in the center torso and another in the left torso. The 2 tons of ammunition for the machine gun, along with 2 tons of LRM ammunition, were shielded by case. The Goliath 3M is frustrating because it's a mech full of missed opportunities. The Gauss rifle is neat, and it would definitely help with keeping mechs from wandering too close. However, the ammo limitation is just bizarre when a ton of machine gun ammunition could easily be dropped without noticing any decrease in performance. 16 shots with that Gauss rifle would be much, much better. Thankfully, there would be a Goliath 3M2 subvariant that did try to tackle the issue by pulling machine guns and their ammunition in exchange for a couple of small pulse lasers. If you want a pre-invasion Goliath, this might be your pick. In 3067, the Goliath again received an upgrade that refit and sought to boost the hitting power of the mech, though it still suffered at close ranges. Defiance Industries and Tharhas Industries each took on the challenge of producing the new design with some substantive changes. They made a considerable shift in the structure of the mech, dropping its center of gravity and creating a much more streamlined design. It continued to be a stable weapons platform, but at a slightly lower vantage point. The Goliath 4S retained the 64.8 km/h top speed with the help of a light fusion engine rather than an XL, which the designers felt made the mech too vulnerable. 10 double heat sinks were installed instead of the 17 standard normals from the previous variants, yay, though they did keep the armor at 16 tons of standard plate. This left 32 tons of the total 80 for weapons and ammunition. The star of the show for the 4S is clearly the heavy Gauss rifle, which takes up 18 tons of that 32. With 4 tons of ammunition, the 4S could stick around for 16 shots before requiring a visit from the ammunition ferry. A possible 25 damage at 6 hexes does sound nice, doesn't it? As out of tradition, the LRM-10 was added to the right torso along with 1 ton of ammunition. Finally, in the right torso, a pair of ER medium lasers could at least help, as both the heavy Gauss and the LRM-10, which have minimum range restrictions that underline the persistent vulnerability of the Goliath through the centuries. The 4S represented a significant effort to go all in on making the Goliath a more important and valuable battlemech. Your opinion on how successful this variant is may fall to your views on the heavy Gauss rifle and that 16 rounds of ammunition. Personally, I don't see myself taking the 4S unless I had no other choice. We're not going to get to all the variants today, but I think the next we're going to look at will be the Goliath's saving grace if you're willing to play a little further down the timeline. The Goliath 5D comes to us from House Davion in an effort to update the mech yet again with some new technology. It returned to a standard fusion engine and cut back to 14.5 tons of armor, but maintained that 4.6 movement. Its primary weapon was a rotary AC-5, which could put quite a bit of fire on target out to 15 hexes. Backing it up at the mid-range were 3 ER medium lasers in the right torso. A 4th ER medium was placed into the open head critical slot, and 4 machine guns were added for close defense, 2 of which were rear-facing. Finally, a targeting computer would make firing all of those weapons and actually hitting the target a little easier. If you're looking for a Goliath variant that is a solid generalist that can perform well across most situations, I think the Goliath 5D is a great choice. Now, if you're hoping to see the Goliath running a brawler setup at some point, the 7C variant may be for you. It ran a light fusion engine and light ferrofibrous armor to save some weight for a mixture of close-range weaponry. The belle of the ball was the Ultra AC-10 in the right torso, which finally does away with weapons with minimum ranges. The autocannon was backed up by a pair of Streak SRM-6s split between the left and right torsos. Finally, a pair of ER medium lasers in the left and center torso finish up the loadout. The 12 double heat sinks kept the mech cool as its Mechwarrior unloaded on some poor hapless Mechwarrior who wandered too close. A full alpha strike could do up to 58 damage on a target, which was enough to give any brave mech hoping to score a quick kill on a Goliath a second thought or even a third. If you're looking to humble someone who has written off the Goliath as worthless, the 7C may be the variant for you. Just don't tip your hand too early and get picked off at long range. When the Wolf Empire claimed the planet Stewart in 3140, the Goliath production line there was run by Quarian Enterprises, and was seen as an opportunity to take advantage of existing industry as well as win a PR victory with the people of the planet. They upgraded the production line to create a C version of the Goliath that would be a battlefield centerpiece and could cut down any foe it came across. The final product is an interesting mishmash of technology that can definitely pack a punch. As far as structure goes, the core was pretty much left the same as the original 3025 Goliath. The only significant change was the addition of a compact gyro, which bought up enough room to add a clan targeting computer. 11 inner sphere double heat sinks keep the mech somewhat cool. In the left torso quad turret, a clan Gauss rifle, ER large laser, and a micro pulse laser can rotate completely around the mech. An advanced tactical missile 9 system in the right torso can cause trouble at all ranges, and an ER medium laser mounted in the mech's head is nice insurance. Finally, there are 4 anti-battle armor pods encased in the legs to keep the riffraff at bay. Heat is a limitation, though you're unlikely to be firing all of your weapons each turn. There wasn't enough room for a third ton of ATM ammunition, so some choices are going to have to be made there. Overall, it's a very powerful battlemech that can easily do up to 34 damage at extremely long range. At shorter ranges, use of the high explosive ammunition for the ATM can be absolutely devastating with a possible 27 damage. It's a testament to the fact that you can just cram a bunch of clan tech onto a mech and it tends to get better. Shocking revelations, I know. Remember, the 8:30 show is completely different from the 9:30 show. Don't forget to tip your waiter. Now, we do have one more official variant that I want to cover before we move on. The Goliath 7K was a variant cobbled together by Osaka Heavy Metrics, a Draconis Combine-based company, to finally address some of the lingering flaws in the mech's traditional loadouts. It's unclear how the company came into possession of the design construction specs, but it very likely wasn't through official channels. It was Osaka's first attempt at building a battlemech, and it offered a unique take deserving a spot in this video. The first notable upgrade was the addition of a supercharger to the mech, which allowed it to move at up to 86 km per hour with its 320 light fusion engine. Imagine the looks on the faces of the 7K's enemies when they see it zipping around like a medium mech. The 7K's primary damage dealer was a heavy PPC combined with a capacitor, which boosted the weapon's damage profile to 20. Use of that capacitor had a small chance of damaging both the capacitor and the PPC, but this variant isn't for the meek. Backing up the heavy PPC were a pair of MRM-10s with Apollo fire control systems split between the left and right torso. Their reach out to 15 hexes didn't quite match the heavy PPC, but the Goliath 7K wasn't shy about getting into the mid-range. 2 machine guns were added for close-range protection, as well as an M-Pod anti-personnel weapon added to each of the legs to deal with bothersome infantry and battle armor. Heat is a bit of an issue with the Goliath 7K, as the heavy PPC and capacitor generate 20 units on their own, before adding in the 4 per shot for the LRMs. With only 12 double heat sinks, you're going to need to do some heat management. It's not excessive, and thankfully a full alpha strike only brings you to +4 heat, which is that sweet spot for not suffering any consequences. If you enjoy living on the edge with that heavy PPC and capacitor, the Goliath 7K may be the variant for you. Of course, we can't go without a Mech Frog variant too, so I think this one may surprise you. No plasma rifles or pulse lasers this time, sorry. The Goliath 1MF was forged in the fires of a resurgent Free Worlds League that was seeking every possible advantage following the significant loss of territory to the Wolf Empire. With Alaric busy on Terra, it's time for Purple Bird to strike. 2 structural changes made from the original Goliath were a swap to a light fusion engine and the shift to 15.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. In the left torso, a Thunderbolt 20 launcher is going to be the primary threat out to 18 hexes. However, with only 12 shots, the Mechwarrior needs to make those shots count. In the left torso, a quad turret carries 2 light particle projection cannons which match the Thunderbolt 20's range profile and can each produce a consistent 5 damage turn after turn. Also on the turret are 5 ER small lasers to address any light or medium mechs that expect to rush in and close for an easy Goliath kill. Finally, an ER medium laser located in the mech's head provides general use protection out to 12 hexes. With only 12 double heat sinks, the Goliath 1MF is not heat neutral, but at the point where you're resorting to the use of the ER small lasers, the targets are likely inside the minimum range of the Thunderbolt 20 and even the light PPCs. The Goliath 1MF has a thick hide, can hit hard, and can hold its own in a brawl. What more could you ask for? So, what do we make of this battlemech? Though not as contentious as VTOLs, quads have their fans and detractors. The limited internal locations on a quad mech are always going to be an issue in a straight-up comparison between it and a bipedal design. However, the ability to mount a quad turret and quirks like the multi-track can offer the quad some advantages on the battlefield. While I don't personally have a long track record of quad use, I appreciate that they exist, and I am very happy that the Goliath managed to make it down the timeline without being forgotten by history. So why do we love the Goliath? It's a big lumbering tank on 4 legs. If 2 big stompy legs are good, then 4 must be better, right? It's an open question if the quad mech is destined to ultimately be the Betamax of battlemechs. Time will tell, though it seems that our friend the quad mech isn't going away anytime soon. With that, I'll say thank you for coming by to talk some BattleTech. As always, it's been a blast to dig up the info for you, and hopefully it was enjoyable enough to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more. It's mostly painless. Mostly. Channel members and Ko-Fi people, you rock as always. I can't do this without you. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.